All right, we're gonna smoke the pipe briefly. I recently turned 21. I had this pipe laying around. A friend of mine gifted it to me, and it felt like I ought to use it. So we're gonna light this up really quick. Hopefully, it doesn't become a habit. Maybe the thing will be I'll smoke a pipe when I record a YouTube video for aura points, as well as just general, like, it's gonna get my mental going. But I don't want this to become a habit. But I'm sure that's what they all say. And why am I dressed up? I'm giving a talk in a couple hours on the ethics of attention. So I'll probably post that up here if I'm allowed to. I don't know. I know it's being recorded, but I don't know what the deal is going to be with that. But real quick, it's embarrassing. A better filter on this thing. I just sucked some. All right, let's get into it. This piece originally appeared on my Substack, Tension Economics. We have a new logo in the house. That's excellent. It's exciting stuff. So this is When All Death Becomes Suicide, the teleology of science and our transhumanist future. This is the amalgamation of just some thoughts I've had on transhumanism, some conversations I've had with the incredible University of Missouri professor. He was at BC as a grad student. That's how I got to know him. Dallas Terry, really smart guy, brilliant dude. And as well as the Abolition of Man, which is a book by C.S. Lewis. So that's where the thoughts are coming from with this. But anyway, all right, let's get into it. We've been putting nature to the rack for over 400 years now. And while we have learned much, there still exist secrets yet to be divulged. Human nature, it seems, stands steadfast and resolute in the face of the scalpel and the microscope. In science is setting man apart from nature, a subject, observing an object, something to ask questions about rather than the questioner itself. We have lost the ability to know ourselves. The transhumanists want to solve this problem by collapsing the distinction entirely. If we cannot know ourselves as subjects, perhaps we can master ourselves as objects. Strap humanity to the rack and finally extract its confession. All right, there's our opening paragraph. And yeah, that's more or less what the transhumanists seem to want to do. That's the really interesting thing about consciousness just in general. I think or the nature of man. Many people have tried to define it. Aristotle called us political animals. Heidegger called us, he called us docile, but he also went on to call us the animal that can tell stories about itself. I kind of interpret that as like we are narrative creatures. But it's really hard to actually get a grasp on what we mean when we say human nature. And so, it's like even neuroscientists, they're like, we're not going to really understand consciousness until we can go inside the brain. And but not in like a way of like looking at parts, you know what I mean? And so this is really the difficult thing here. All right, let's get more into the teleology of science. I'm going to light this up one more time. Since its inception, science has not been the neutral, unbiased project so many believe it to be. This comes to a shock to most decent-minded and earnest people. I myself was struck by the fact that the institution I had assumed to be in perfect accord with reason and having no ulterior motives other than the pursuit of knowledge for curiosity's sake could have goals that might be described as a priori, architectonic, or moral. This is exactly the case. One of my friends read this article when it came out. His name is Peter Swindell, really brilliant guy. He sent me, I should not name drop him. He sent me a really long text about this, and I'll just read a section of it because I thought it was really well written. He said, think about it. Think about high school. Your high school, for instance, the scientific method is presented to students not just as an epistemological method of gaining knowledge in a scientific way, but it's actually the only coherent model of gaining knowledge students are ever exposed to. In the American educational system, there is no rational means of attaining first principles that is presented to students ethically or metaphysically. Postmodern truth is power philosophy more or less dominates the strictly ethical conversations. And so that's more or less what's going on. I had a professor say something really wise yesterday too. He said, ever since Hobbes, we have more or less, ever since Hobbes, what did he actually say? Ever since Hobbes, we've stopped thinking about the ends, because ends posit that there is a human nature. If I say there is like an end of justice, or there's certain virtues, or there's ends to knowledge or something, that to do that, you kind of have to posit a nature of man. And so after Hobbes, all political philosophy and philosophy in general, and really the way that we think about it now, we kind of stopped doing that. And now we focus on means. We don't focus on ends anymore. We focus on the only means that really matters, and that is power. And so that's kind of what he's saying there. But he's also talking about how, like, science is presented to us in school as like, especially when you're young, like, this is the only legitimate ways of knowing. And of course, that's not the case. It's not the case. I hope you know it's not the case. All right. Yet that is exactly what science does have. It has posited ends just like any other undertaking. The father of modern science, Francis Bacon, said as much, claiming that nature must be bound, controlled, or penetrated by experimentation. Very freaky, very freaky. Not only are his metaphors gruesome and sadistically sexual, but they also feminize nature, turning the it of nature into her, the chaotic and powerful goddess, in need of a good whipping and a firm hand. This is very true. His metaphors are quite sexual. You get the impression that nature is kind of this sprite or nymph that Bacon is chasing in his old, Enlightenment clothing through the woods, and he's going to catch her and put her over his knee and do, terrible things. But why? Why must nature be bound and penetrated? What is the point of all this violence? Bacon answers clearly. He says, the relief of man's estate, the alleviation of suffering, the conquest of necessity. In short, to bring heaven down to earth. And that is that's the real pill here, guys. If you're looking for something to take away from this, science is fundamentally about bringing heaven down to earth. That's not to say there aren't many the neutral scientists out there who really are just, they don't think about things like that. They're stuck in left brain mode and they're just kind of doing their thing. But if you really get into the philosophy of science, that is what it's trying to do. Now, readers might object. Just because the initial purpose of the scientific undertaking was bound up in such metaphors doesn't mean the whole project is rotten from the start. To this, I would agree. One can certainly raise a disturbed eyebrow at the relationship between Muhammad and Aisha, without disregarding the Muslim world's creation of algebra and the advent of coffee. I certainly wouldn't want coffee to not exist, and I think algebra is useful, though I'm not much of a mathematician. But what I'm saying here is, Aisha was what? She was 6 when she married Muhammad, and then 9 when he consummated the marriage. It doesn't get more disturbing than that, folks. And similarly with science, like Bacon was a freak, and he also had these very kind of, we need to bring heaven down to earth kind of goals. But that doesn't mean your average biologist is thinking in such terms. But it is inherent within the structure of it. Just as I would argue that when the founder of your religion was a pedophile, that is inherent within the structure of your religion. Just one of the many reasons Islam's a little bit cooked. But before fully diving into transhumanism, I think it is important that we quickly make the distinction between science and scientism. Science is a humble and useful tool, one that ought to be incorporated into ethics and allows us to ask certain kind of questions. Scientism, on the other hand, is the erroneous belief. Note my usage of the word belief. As the scientific method cannot be proven true by the use of the scientific method alone. That all that cannot be measured, quantified, or observed is either useless or backward. This scientism comes with an ingrained sense of what C.S. Lewis called chronological snobbery. And because we've mentioned C.S. Lewis, I will light the pipe again. All right, so what is chronological snobbery? It's a sentiment that says we are better, wiser, and more just than our ancestors because we caught and caged the primordial temptress called nature, and they let her have her way with them. So, this is true. I think we do tend to think that, like, our ancestors did not have the same mastery over nature that we have, and so therefore we think that they're backward, they're cave people, even the enlightened ones among them. people who are much wiser than your average person today, more common sense, and also probably a great deal more of philosophy and good reading. We still look at them as backwards because we now understand how to split the atom. I myself don't. You probably don't, but a few of us do. So we say, yeah, we're better. And again, well, it might be rightly said that not all those who deal in science are scientistic. It is rightly said that all those who subscribe to scientism deal in science. It is these people that the rest of this essay will apply to, those who wish to bring heaven down to earth, the transhumanists. I mean, we all know who these people are. I mean, we're talking about the Teals, you know, the Musks, the Mark Andreessens. I think Joe Rogan's been flirting with it recently too, though I don't really watch him anymore, to be honest. But I do believe from clips I've seen that he's now captured by the transhumanists. I think he's into it. So, who are these transhumanists? I assume that if you are reading this essay, you are already quite familiar with those people of which I speak, who those people are. Therefore, we won't spend as much time on these people on who these people are, but rather what their aim is. Their aims are straightforward enough: radical life extension, merging with AI, transcendence to a higher level of consciousness, and starting the next phase of human evolution. They advocate for the right to redesign our own biology as we see fit and suspend biological age ad infinitum. All of these goals are wrapped up in the language of autonomy, choice, and morphological freedom. Who could object to choice? Who could argue against freedom? Surely only a tyrannical Luddite would do such a thing. But not so, dear reader and dear viewer. But not so. Or if so, then I am me. I am that tyrannical Luddite. No, I think myself quite sane, but don't take my word for it. Let's follow their logic and see exactly where this leads us. And yeah, it is interesting how the transhumanists, they kind of wrap up all of their proposals in just, you know, very modern language of autonomy. They don't really consider the actual, you know, is this a good thing? They're more concerned with, well, you know, it's about improving choice, but never the actual I'm blanking on the word. What is the word for just the inherent like goodness or badness of the act. But let's keep going. Now, just a few lines ago, I referenced the transhumanist usage of words like autonomy or freedom. Where have we seen these words before? Are these not the very same words under which the sexual revolution took shape? Prior to the sexual revolution, some women died in childbirth. Some marriages trapped people in loveless bondage. And sometimes the silence around sexuality created its own pathologies of shame and ignorance. The sexual revolution responded to some real suffering and injustice. But notice how it responded. It did not respond by elevating sexuality, not by recovering its sacred character, but by technologizing it. This is a really important point. This is not even really my thinking as much. This is coming from my buddy Dallas. But like his whole thing that, because he was the one who really got me thinking on this wave, because I wrote a piece. Hold on. Okay, we're good on time. I wrote a piece last year for a fellowship I was in on how we might be able to reinstate trust between the sexes, because I do think it's broken down a little bit at present. But he said, all right, you're thinking in too modern of terms. You got to actually wind it back a little bit further to you know, the sexual revolution and even further back than that, but science, and understand where this urge to master our own nature is coming from, you know. And so yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, things were not perfect before the sexual revolution, but I think in many ways the sexual revolution, in trying to conquer our nature, actually allowed it to, it kind of subverted it. And then when it came back out, it came back in a more warped and twisted way. I mean, think about OnlyFans. Think about BDSM. Think about all of the freaky shit that people are doing out there. I mean, what did I see? I mean, I saw a woman who was doing like, come get ready for me for my domination session, where and she's eating a bunch of Indian food because the guy she's gonna go see has a fucking shit kink. I'm just saying, this is kind of the world we're in now. This is the world post post-sexual revolution, where online pornography captures the hearts and minds and souls, one might say, of young men around like the age of 11 or 12. And then by the time they get to that gentleman's age, they want to get shit on because nothing else can give them that high anymore. That's the diminishing returns of sexuality as well. And this is, I mean, you will not debate me on this. This comes from the sexual revolution. So let's keep going though. I need to light my pipe again too. This is important stuff. The sexual revolution sought to unburden and liberate women of the sometimes grisly necessities of their nature, and in doing so, enabled them to act like men. This language of autonomy, coupled with scientism, led people to believe that sex was purely a biomechanical function. The act itself, with all its meaning, mystery, and moral weight, was reduced to measurable inputs and outputs, pleasure in, pregnancy out. Another field in which we could adjust the variables and control the outcomes. The promise of bodily freedom only led to a new kind of bondage, to the inquietus and degenerate hookup culture, wherein the technology suppressed sexual nature returned, only just stronger and more deformed. Not to mention the over 1 million abortions that take place in the United States alone every year. Though, of course, to scientistic souls, those are merely the extractions of unwanted cellular clumps. I don't want to go on like a pro-life rant right here or anything like that, but I do think we should think about this just a little bit. I mean, the whole abortion problem, the whole discourse we have on it in this country would literally not exist. Well, obviously, if the sexual revolution hadn't happened because of the technology that enabled us. But it wouldn't exist if we still actually saw sex as sacred and something that you don't just do casually. If sex was still attached to the actual outcome of giving birth and having responsibility when you go to have sex and realizing that, no, this actually might result in a human coming into existence, then abortion would not be an issue. And I'm not trying to take like a partisan stance on this. I'm trying to take an ethical one. Like it's for me personally, it's too reductive to refer to something that is going to be birthed as a cellular clump and is just a coping mechanism that we have. It's a reduction of the real grotesqueness of the act because people want to keep just having casual sex. But if we actually took responsibility for it, if sex had a sacred element to it, we wouldn't have the problem of abortion because people wouldn't just go have sex willy-nilly. So, I mean, but that's, you know, it's elementary stuff, but I do think it's really worth considering what happens when we try to subvert our nature. Things lose their meaning. Sex is not meaningful anymore. You know, you're going to get married now, and your wife is probably going to have 10 prior partners. You might have 15. You might have 8. It doesn't really matter. You're going to have some, assuming you're not like Christian. So it's just dark shit, man. It's dark shit what happens when we try to subvert our nature. Anyway, where are we at? By severing sex from consequences, we didn't transcend sexual nature or recover its sacred character. We unleashed it in a detached it from meaning. We never took the time to ask whether certain aspects of our nature ought to be controlled. And in doing so, we desecrated an act that holds the very threads of society together. If then, this is what happens when we try to master one aspect of human nature, what happens when we try to master death itself? Right now, death is still natural and inevitable. And while life expectancies have risen substantially over the last 100 years, the human lifespan is yet to reach anything we might call Ubermenschen. We're using a Nietzschean term there. But within the next 100 years, it is not unreasonable to expect, especially if Brian Johnson has his way, that our lifespans may double, if not go far beyond. I don't even hate Brian Johnson. I think there's worse transhumanists out there. I think I'm not of the belief that just because you are enjoying yourself, you ought to just do something, you know? I think everybody who defends Brian Johnson, they don't agree with what he's doing, but they're just he gets meaning out of it, so just let him do it. I don't know. I find that disturbing. I find it very disturbing, but we won't get into that right now. But I think there's worse transhumanists out there. I think Thiel scares me more than Brian Johnson because he's going for slightly more technological ways of solving it. As far as I know, Johnson doesn't talk about uploading his consciousness or anything like that. He's more just, how do I reverse the biological aging of my organs? Which, you know what? In some ways, I can almost get behind. Of course, such treatments, if one can really call them that, as they aren't treating anything broken, would not be available to the general public at first, likely descending through the tiers of class till everyone has some access if they so desire. It doesn't take much imagination to envision a scenario where life plans are paid for via monthly subscriptions with different tiers. This reminds me, like, when I wrote that, I was kind of thinking of that one Justin Timberlake movie. He's really not that bad of an actor. I think we need to give Justin Timberlake some more respect. But the one where you have, like, on your wrist, you have a timestamp of how much time you have left, and that's how you pay for things. Really interesting stuff. But yeah, I mean, you could almost imagine, like, you've got the upgraded organs premium plan, you know what I mean? And you get your life extended, so on and so forth. Or like if you stop paying to have your mind on a computer, then they just like delete the database. Obviously, this is much further in the future, but one can imagine it. And I think just the in-shitification of subscription services too is just really fitting. Because, you know, these tech guys, that's their favorite model. So I'm sure they would apply it with their transhumanist ventures. Anyway, eventually, it is not impossible to suspect that death itself will become optional. This will be the true point of no return. For once death becomes optional, the choice to live out a normal life and die at the comparatively young age of 80 will be suicide. So that's the title of the piece. It's kind of what got me thinking about this. It's like, eventually, one of these days, death really will be an option. And at that point, you will, I think Peter Thiel literally just said this, like right as I published this article. I saw a clip on my Instagram. You'll be able to go out like Denethor from Lord of the Rings and light your own funeral pyre and just choose when to die. So, disturbing stuff. In a world where death is optional, there is no such thing as natural death anymore. There are only those who choose to continue living and those who choose actively or passively to die. The category of accepting mortality disappears, replaced by refusing immortality and refusal of life when life is offered. I read that wrong. The category of accepting mortality disappears, replaced by refusing immortality. And refusal of life when life is offered has only one name. And yeah, again, that's suicide for you. The choice to become immortal, just like the choice to prevent pregnancy, will not have the consequences the transhumanists think, at least not for the non-billionaire. It will only be a new burden, a new arms race. Parents will be accused of child abuse if they don't genetically modify their children. The pressure and guilt of walking as a mortal among gods will sway even the most stalwart, and eventually, just as the sexual revolution sapped the sacred from sex, transhumanism will steal meaning from life itself. That's my fear, folks. That's my fear. I can't lie. I think the sexual revolution comparison is actually quite salient. Like, I think that's pretty fair. Try to control our sexual nature. Now sex means nothing. We're going to try to control our lifespans. Life itself will mean nothing, right? I mean, unless it's done in a very careful way, but I don't imagine it will be, because it's not about ethics. It's about profit. And again, that's just kind of how it goes. I'm also really not that pessimistic. Maybe this is what will happen, but I think there will be people who are good who just say, you know what, I'm not going to do it. And they raise generations on generations of people not doing it. And unless the government forces you to comply, I think for a while we will still have humans who enjoy smoking a pipe and reading Keats and shit like that. I don't know. I mean, just like staying, not being cooked. Like, I don't know. Okay. All right. Now we're going to do the C.S. Lewis twist to finish this video off. But there is a final irony here, one that C.S. Lewis saw coming in 1943 when he wrote The Abolition of Man. Lewis observed that man's conquest of nature turns out to be nature's conquest of man. We think we are escaping nature's tyranny, the tyranny of death, of limitation, of the body's frailty, but we are only replacing nature's blind tyranny with a seeing one. For who decides what humanity should become? Not humanity in the abstract, but specific humans, the conditioners, as Lewis called them. This would be Thiel. This would be Andreessen. Those who control the technology of human modification will possess unprecedented power over the rest of us. And these conditioners Having rejected any objective standard of the good, the Tao, the natural, divine order, call it what you will have nothing to guide their redesign of human nature but their own desires, themselves the products of irrational evolutionary social forces. This is the ultimate irony of the transhumanist project. In seeking to transcend nature, we don't escape her dominion. We simply ensure her tyranny is exercised through the deliberate choices of those with the technology, rather than through the blind forces our ancestors lived under. At least the blind forces were truly blind, operating by no will and claiming no righteousness. The new masters will have eyes, and they will insist their vision is for our own good. We tried to suppress sexual nature, and it returned as hookup culture and abortion. We will try to suppress death itself, and it will return as suicide. The suicide of those who refuse enhancement. The suicide of meaning in a world where nothing is given and everything is chosen. The suicide of humanity itself as we redesign ourselves into something we no longer recognize. The transhumanists promise heaven on earth, but heaven, when built by human hands alone, has a tendency to become something much more akin to hell. Bacon wanted to put nature on the rack. The transhumanists have finally succeeded. The body strapped to the table, waiting for the knife, is our own. Bang. There you go. Just checking the time real quick. Okay, we're doing it right. That's what's going on, essentially, ladies and gentlemen. And the C.S. Lewis thing is very true and very disturbing. We're human beings. We're living in a material and, as in my opinion, spiritual, but a material universe. We're part of nature. Everything we build, even the things that seem most unnatural, are still built with natural elements. We are in nature, for lack of a better word. And therefore, anytime we try to conquest against nature, it's kind of like the war on drugs or the war on terror. Any conquest, any war against a noun, it never works. And it'll only be the same with transhumanism. And worse yet, like Lewis points out so well, nature, at least when we're not trying to control it, has a blind tyranny. Yes, you might have people born with ailments. You might have people, born of great heights who can go in like step warriors and take over a village, right? And that does suck. You might die at a random age from a heart attack, but that tyranny is blind. When we allow the transhumanists the power to enact their vision, like Lewis says, it's not going to be blind. And again, while I'm not as pessimistic as my article may sound, I do think we have to consider that this is a big thing that we're doing here. And philosophy's disconnection from science for all of modernity has been one of the greatest failures of the human race. The disconnection of ethics from science, it's terrible. You can't explain the nuclear bomb any other way. You can't explain chemical warfare any other way. So, yeah, that's where I'm at with this one, folks. A little bit more pessimistic, but I think the fit was tough, and the pipe was kind of fun. This might be more of a routine moving forward. But if you enjoyed this, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Definitely go check out the Substack. That's what I care about most, if I'm being honest. But do subscribe to the YouTube if you mess with it. And yeah, never be a transhumanist. Die at 80. Die at 80 like your grandfather and his before him, or earlier. I'm sure many of us die earlier. But you know what? That's okay, because we did it the natural way, and that's better. It just is. Anyway, have a good day, everybody. Thank you very much. And peace.